What's up, everyone? Welcome to Dipped in Tone. I'm Rhett.
I'm Zach.
What's up, dude?
Man, I think you need to come back to Nashville. We need to hang out in person again.
Yeah, I was supposed to come up last week for a thing, and then the thing fell through, and it's like, Nashville's weird for me because it's only 3.5 hours away, so it's like, I can go up whenever. But then every time I want to go up, it's like, it's 3.5 hours.
It's a whole thing.
I just never end up going.
So what have you been up to?
Oh, man. Actually kind of getting back to somewhat normalcy here. You know, working on videos, working on projects. I've got a couple weeks at home before I have to travel again. So,
yeah,
you know.
Living that YouTuber life, man.
Living the dream. I have that shirt, by the way. Did you get that at the Macari's in London?
I did. Yeah,
I did too.
It was I was there not too long before they closed the doors of the store itself.
Yeah.
I just received, it's not my shell, but it's back there on that PRS amp. You can't see it. I got the Gig Rig G3S.
Yeah.
And when I ordered it, because I had to wait, I was like super pumped. Like, this is going to be so cool. And now that I've got it, it's so overwhelming.
I'll
thought
admit,
of like using this thing.
You polled me the other day with like the pedal board layout, and I was like, oh, he's got the Gig Rig on there. And I was thinking, like, this doesn't seem very Zach-ish, having a MIDI switcher on your board.
Maybe this is another episode where we like deep dive into this thought process. But I've been like racking my brain about how to go about it because I really want to use it, and I'm just trying to figure it out. I think I've landed on some stuff, so maybe we'll save it.
Okay, yeah, we should save it. But I will, like, I've had 2 pedal boards now with elaborate like loop switcher MIDI switching thing, and they're amazing for like gigs where like when I was playing in Jesse's band, there's a lot of really effects heavy guitar sounds on that record, like, and you have to go from, you know, the verse sound is a small stone phaser with a slapback and a compressor, and then the chorus goes immediately just to like the fuzz, and everything else is dry. So having the switcher to just bam, knock it out, and then being able to switch between, and having the MIDI capability to switch your MIDI pedals is great. But, you know, it's going to take you a minute to wrap your head around it.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of phone calls with Dan, I think, because like how we're going to use it is going to be MIDI controlling a couple things, and then like analog stuff. And mainly my thought is like mixing up order. And since that has all the gain in it, I can like match levels of guitars. So I could have like a Telecaster preset or a Strat preset. So like they're whatever amp I'm going into, there's more of a consistency. But I'm going to go for it. And damn it, I don't want to make cables, but I'm going to have to make a lot of cables for this thing.
Cables. Yeah, that's the other thing. You get to get real handy at making cables.
Oh, gosh. But before we get into talking about our guests, I want to thank all of our patrons over on Patreon. If you want to learn more about supporting the show, go to the link in the description and learn all about the tiers over on patreon.com.
And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe. Click the subscribe button and the bell down below to be notified when we've got new episodes coming out. And it helps the show greatly when you subscribe. And also, if you're listening on like Apple Podcasts or anything like that, rate and review the show. Helps new people find us. Mm-hmm. Awesome. So okay. I'm pretty excited about today's guest. We have Bridget Kearney from one of my favorite bands, Lake Street Dive. They've got a new album coming out. And it's not often that we get to talk to a bass player, and not just a bass player, but like a real upright, like heavy hitter bass player.
Yes.
Be sure to stick around because she drops some wisdom for all us guitar nerds out there, coming from a different perspective. So without any further ado, here is Bridget Kearney. Bridget, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so I want to start off. I was reading up about the new album today, the new Lake Street Dive record, and you guys were using a D20 dice to come up with chord progressions. Is that true?
Yes. So Aki, our keyboard player, and I started playing Dungeons and Dragons together during the COVID lockdown, like on Zoom with some friends. So we concocted this system of rolling D20s for chords, meter, and tempo.
Okay.
I love it.
Break it down. How does this work? Because it sounds really cool.
Okay, so for tempo, you roll the d20, whatever's on the dice, it's that times 10 plus 50. So you, if you get a 1, then you get 100. No, that can't be right. Because there was basically the range of tempos that were possible were like 50 or 60 to 200.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. So and so you end up with the full range of tempos, which is awesome. It's like nice to have things that just kind of force you out of your comfort zone and get like a range of possibilities in play that you might not be your like go-to.
Yeah.
Okay. Then for chords, whatever's on the dice, like if it's 1 through 7, that's the first 7 diatonic chords, 1 major, 2 minor, 3 minor, etc. 8 through 14 is again those first 7 diatonic chords. So 8 is 1, 9 is 2. And then 15 through 20 are the relative major or minor of that number. So it's like 15 is 1 minor, 16 is 2 major. And so I guess in that instance, you have about a 25% chance of getting like a weird chord that's like non-diatonic in some ways, and 75% chance of getting a normal chord. And then the meter thing was like a little bit undefined. It was kind of like you roll, and then Mike Calabrese, our drummer, is like, okay, 13, that means like a bar of 5 and a bar of 8 or something. Most of those like weird numbers that we landed on the meter side of things, most of those songs didn't make the record, but a couple did, including Good Together, which is in like a 4+3 kind of 7. And that was the lead single. That's like the first single from our record was written with this method. So
an odd meter lead single for the new record based off of a writing system of D20 die. That's amazing.
And I have to ask, like, what's your build? Like, what's your character build? Like, no, we don't have to go into that. We might let everyone just click off immediately.
I don't know, man. I think there's probably our audience is mostly nerds. So
definitely.
Yeah. Dragonborn monk.
Love it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what was it like? I mean, when you were actually working on writing these songs, was it everyone in the room together, you'd roll the dice and then it was just, working as a team, or did you sort of like split off and kind of do your own thing? How did that work?
So the reason we kind of came up with this system in the first place was like, this was our first time attempting to write in the room together after almost 20 years of being in a band. Like in the past, we had always written separate from one another, but kind of on a trajectory of moving every album a little bit more collaborative. Like the last album before this one of originals, obviously that one, we did a lot of writing in pairs. But that would also be remote. It would be like, I would come up with an idea and have maybe a verse and a chorus, email it to a friend. They would work on it for a little bit, send it back to me. So this was the first time where we really like challenged ourselves to say like, can we do it this way? Can we just like sit and talk about what we want a song to be about and what we want the record to be about, and then write from there? And we had a couple of early successes with that process. The song Help Is on the Way was the first one that we wrote, where we were like, let's write a song that's about this. And then spent some time workshopping it together. Again, still kind of like went our separate ways for a while, wrote some lyrics, came back, worked on it together. But that was like, oh, we can actually do this. And it's landing us in like a new, interesting place that we haven't been before. And then we reached like a state of collective paralysis where, the co-writing thing, this is really the tough part about it, is when you aren't immediately finding a flow and you just become filled with self-doubt, and there's an awkward silence in the room, and you're like, should we be a band anymore? It's like, yeah, it becomes existential really fast. So we just wanted to get the wheels in motion. And so that's when we came up with this dice system. And yeah, somebody would roll for those parameters, chords, meter, tempo, and then they would be like the captain of that song. So nice. Then we would go to our instruments and start playing at, 150 beats per minute with the 4 chord, the 4 minor chord, the 2 chord, and whatever. And they could say, okay, we're staying at 150 beats per minute, but I want the eighth notes to be swung, or I want them to be swung less, or whatever. Or they could say, okay, we're staying here, but I want it to have a backbeat. Let's see what that's like. Or we're staying here, but I think the 4 chord should be at the end of the phrase instead of at the beginning of it. And so you kind of shift things around like within the rules. And then we would like find something that felt good, make a little demo of it, and send the captain away to work on it for about like a half hour, like a limited short amount of time, go away for a half hour and just write a verse and a chorus over it, see what you come up with.
That's a really creative way of putting some limitations around the writing process, it seems. Even the time limit, like you've got a half hour, so it's almost like making the captain commit to things and move on rather than spending a ton of time working on one part over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think like we've just over the years had to find various ways of like silencing that inner critic and getting to the other side of something and then deciding if you like it or not. And you can always say, no one's ever going to hear this outside of this room. But you have to like make something first before you can say whether it's going to turn out well or not.
It sounds like a great way to break through the like that creative process too when you hit roadblocks, because it, like, I know for me, even if I'm just trying to do like a pedal demo or something like simple, sometimes if I do a couple in a day, I'll do one and it'll be like, oh man, like that was awesome, and then I try to do another one and it's just like nothing happens. So making a game out of it seems like such a fantastic way to make it fun and to break through the wall.
Yeah, like my creative self is like lazy, and so I need to sort of like get them to get out of bed, Mm-hmm. And also I'm sometimes like haunted by my own bad ideas. Like years later, I'll be like humming something to myself and I'll be like, what is that? And I'm like, oh my God, it's that terrible song I wrote 10 years ago and I still in my head, So there are those things to combat, but it's always worth it when you do find that thing that you love.
That's awesome. So as a bass player, our audience is mostly guitarists. We're a pretty nerdy guitar focused podcast. And so anytime we have bass players on, I'm always curious to see, like, I picked up bass about 10 years ago, just so I could learn it to work on demos and stuff. And I found that it immediately made me a better guitar player, like overnight, because it showed me that I wasn't actually listening to my bandmates, and I didn't think of myself as part of the rhythm section. And so as primarily a bass player, what advice would you give to guitar players out there that are either thinking about getting into bass or are not convinced they should get into bass?
Yeah, the bass is just like so powerful, I think. Like it's got the absence of bass makes the entrance of bass like just feel so huge. I mean, I guess that's true of anything, but particularly the bass drop, is like so effective, and like playing with different ranges of where you're sitting on the bass can have that effect too. And then I think it's also because it's a single note instrument compared to like guitar and piano, which can be single note instruments, but oftentimes are playing chords. It's just inherently melodic. Like it's always got this horizontal flow of one note sort of climbing to the next and falling to the next. And so, yeah, I love like playing with bass and making it as melodic as possible without being terribly distracting to the rest of the band.
What would you say to a guitar player that maybe has like the fundamentals and they know the fretboard, the notes on the board? Like, where's a good place to start? Because for me, like, I'm kind of like with Rhett, I just learned it out of the necessity, but I don't know it. What's a good place to kind of like take that leap into really learning what makes a bass player a bass player?
Well, one of my favorite bass players is Paul McCartney, and I think that he is so melodic with the bass parts. Like it's very different than like visualizing the song moving along and saying chord, chord, chord. Like it's always like parts and kind of, oftentimes fills these little gaps where the vocal melody is resting. Then there'll be a little bass line that comes in, like a boony, noony, noony, and so yeah, he's one of my favorite like bass players, although he also plays guitar and plays piano. But the way he plays bass is very different, I think, from the way he plays those instruments. I've heard too that like on a lot of the Beatles records in particular, the bass would be one of the last things that got put on the track. Like he would track rhythm guitar or rhythm piano like as the live instrument sometimes that goes on the first layer of tape, and then very end of the process the bass comes in, which is cool because that's when you know where those little gaps are, that there's like room for something to come to the forefront and then recede back into like, now I'm just being supportive bass person. But yeah, I think my favorite bass players are the ones that can do both of those things, like be super invisible and supportive when necessary, and then find those moments to like really write a bass part that's like integral to the song. That's like, you can't do the song without the line.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard that too about McCartney's bass lines, and I always thought that was so interesting about tracking the bass last. Is that something that you've ever done with Lake Street Dive?
Not really, but I guess that's sometimes part of my writing process. Like when writing for Lake Street Dive is like, usually I'll just be writing kind of the chords on the top line with no bass part in the initial tracking of like a demo, and then come in towards the end and be like, oh, what's a part that's going to add another layer of like melodic interest, and again, just kind of like create some of those moments of like call and response with the vocal melody and the bass part.
So with your writing process, when it's just you, I mean, we've covered the band and the die situation, but what does the writing process look like when you are on your own, whether you're writing something for your own solo project or Lake Street Dive? Is it the same sort of approach? And then you kind of decide, hey, this might be a good demo for Lake Street Dive versus myself, or do you have different processes for the different ideas?
It's pretty similar. Like it's changed over the years, but these days I like to write in a DAW, like in Logic usually. And so I'll be putting in a keyboard idea, and that kind of gives me some time to just like live in the world of the song and continue to let my subconscious do a little bit of work on like what should happen next, or what should verse 2 be about, or whatever. And then it's also cool because it gives a lot of flexibility to change things. Like there's a song on the new Lake Street Dive record, Dance with a Stranger, which is one that I wrote on my own. And that one I was like writing in a DAW and had put in the drum groove and a bass line and some chords and the melody. And I was like listening back to it and I was like, this is cool, but it's like, it had this kind of like spooky, mysterious feeling to it that was like not what I thought I wanted the song to actually say musically. And so what I ended up doing is just keeping the drum groove, keeping the vocal melody, keeping the lyrics, the whole structure of the song, and just changing the chords. And even the like melody of the bass line, the sort of melodic contour of it, the melodic rhythm, bum 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 bum, like it was that, but in like D minor 7, and then it became that in a sort of like more like 3-6-2-5-1 warm flowing chord structure. And you can do that in like a half hour. You can just be like, okay, all of these other ingredients are there. I'm just going to change this one thing, and bam.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I'm so curious about this. So when you're as a bass player and you're writing, you're putting the other structural elements of the song in, but specifically on the drum groove, you said you put the drum groove in. So are you programming it, with the MIDI keyboard, or are you looking for like a drum sampler groove? I'm just curious, like, as a bass player, do you have the bass line first and then you're finding the drum groove to fit that, or is it the other way around?
I use sometimes, like I have some one-shot drum samples that I made out of like a friend's tracks that he sent me a while back that is just like kick, snare, hi-hat. And so I'll like make things out of that sometimes. And that's a more like invisible supportive layer of what the drums will be. And then Mike Calabrese will get like way more creative with it. In this instance, this was kind of like an assignment or a suggestion from Mike Elizondo. He like a year before we even started writing for the record had sent us all a text with a track in it. And he was like, you should write a song with this groove. And that was the New Heavies. I forget the name of the song. But yeah, it's kind of that like almost New Jack swing, like hip hop feel. It's probably like 95 beats per minute and like has a little swing to it and a backbeat. So that song that he had sent actually had the drums at the top of the song, or maybe a drum break in the middle. And so I just chopped that out, looped it, and wrote over that.
Nice. That's awesome.
So you have played upright or double bass for a long time, and having toured and played so much, I've sold some working at retail, and when customers came to get it, it was always like a harrowing adventure. Can you regale us with some war stories of traveling with that thing and the perils of traveling with an instrument that is bigger than most people?
I have so many war stories. Okay. First one, Shanghai, 2003. I'm 21 years old or something, putting an upright bass into a taxi cab. And like the way that I was used to doing it at that time, because there weren't a lot, you couldn't like order an Uber XL. You're just in a normal size cab. So you put the front passenger seat down and you stuff the bass into it. And like, I've done this at that point, a bunch of times, and it always seemed like it wasn't going to fit, and then it would fit. But in this case, closed the passenger door and the bass smashed the front windshield of the car. Just like broken glass everywhere. I don't speak Chinese. This cab driver doesn't speak English. He's so mad at me. Yeah. I can't even remember what happened. I obviously must have just paid him as much cash as I had on earth. And, I don't know, somehow found my way back to Iowa after that. Okay, that was one time. I've twice smashed a bass by falling on top of it and then the bridge crushing the body of the bass because of my body weight landing on it twice. And
was this during a gig or?
No. It's never happened on stage. Both of those were just like getting out of a car, going into a rehearsal or whatever. And, it's a little slippery they're large, fragile, and expensive. So it's a triple threat.
What is it like flying with one? I mean, I imagine because you're not getting it on the plane, so you've got to check it. Is that that sounds like a pretty harrowing thing every time? Because I don't like checking my guitars when I fly, even in a good flight case. So how do you deal with that?
So thankfully, around the time that I started flying a lot for gigs, this thing was invented that's like a folding upright bass.
Oh, I've seen those.
Do you know about these? Yeah. So I have one made by a guy named Charlie Chadwick, and it has a little door on the back side of the body of the bass. You pull that up, and then there's a joint on the neck. And so the neck just folds right into the body, which it's then in a hard case, which is better than a soft case. It still weighs 50 pounds. Like, it's still pretty unwieldy, but it definitely made life a lot easier for bass players.
Now, are those ones that he takes existing uprights and modifies them to do that? He's just basically cutting them up and putting the hinge in and doing that?
Yes, I believe so.
That's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. And that one I toured with for maybe 10 years, and it stayed in pretty good shape the whole time. Last war story, but I once was carrying the folding bass down a flight of stairs after a rehearsal, and this flight of stairs was very narrow, and so I didn't have room to have two hands on it. I just had one hand on it and was sort of controlling its path down the top of the stairs, and trying to just slowly bring it down. It got out of my control and was sliding down the stairs, and instead of just letting it go, I sort of tried to catch up with it, and then it pulled me down this flight of stairs. Both the bass and I smash into this metal door at the bottom of the staircase. I got 17 staples in my head.
Oh my God.
Rushed to the emergency room, and the next day I go and I open up the bass expecting for it to be destroyed as well. It's totally fine.
Man.
That sucks. I'm sorry that happened.
All's well that ends well.
That's wild. So I read recently that you've started playing more electric bass. Is that, in terms of Lake Street Dive, are you working that into your Lake Street Dive rig, or are you still primarily playing upright? Because I know on the new record there's a lot of electric bass. So
yeah, I think on the new record it's about half and half, upright and electric. And between obviously our last album and Good Together, the newest one, was when I really started playing electric bass. And so Mike Elizondo, who's the producer of both of those albums, is an incredible bassist and has a crazy collection of electric basses, which I was kind of just oblivious to the first time that we were in his studio. And so the second time around, because I just started playing electric bass, I was so pumped to go back in and see his collection and just have his ears on everything and be working out all the sounds with him. So that was really fun to get to do that. I think the electric basses that I played on the record, there's a jazz bass, which I had never really played a Fender jazz bass before. It's such a distinctive tone. Both of those songs are kind of like in a high register with a low octave pedal. So you get that kind of bright, twangy, natural jazz bass tone, and then the tone of the pedal doing the octave lower.
So what was that transition like, going from, years, decades of playing upright to, 4-string, going fretless to fretted? What were there any challenges that you ran into with that?
There's definitely challenges. I think, they're just so different, orienting to the scale of things, like getting used to where the notes are. I still am less good at, like, on upright bass, I can just be like totally looking around anywhere, singing, like don't need to look at the instrument at all. But I think part of that might be the nature of the instrument. Like the upright bass has a really good landmark around the like a fifth up, because of the body starting there. So you can just throw your thumb here and know that the note's going to be right there. And with electric bass, it's way further before you have like a physical landmark. So yeah, you have to, I guess, just kind of like get used to it, or have, the little dots and be looking at it. So that was the hard part. And then I also was exploring a lot of new possibilities with my right hand on electric bass that like don't really exist for upright, like using a pick, like thumb stuff. Like that's a really cool and exciting new world for me that like sounds so different. And I find that I have a really different feel on with my thumb than with my fingers. So like, it's just fun to know that you can use that at a certain point in the song or for a certain song. And then within the spectrum of different electric basses too, you got your jazz bass, you got your Hofner, you got your P bass. Like, yeah, there's just so many exciting sounds to play with. I don't know what took me this long.
That's really fun to like have found your footing on an instrument, and then after like so long, finally like exploring all the things you've heard on all these records and that you've seen for so long, really diving into it. It probably like reinvigorates like your love of the instrument.
Definitely. And another thing that I never really enjoyed doing with upright bass, because it's so big and cumbersome, is the idea of sitting on a couch watching TV playing your instrument. It's so great. I think I got my Hofner bass right around the beginning of the US Open tennis tournament in 2021, and just sat on the couch watching tennis playing electric bass for 2 weeks.
You got to get one of those little U basses with like the rubber strings or whatever.
Yeah, even better.
Those are rad, actually.
They sound great.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. Have you, like, when you were getting into the electric bass, were you going back and listening to any of your old favorite records, the Beatles stuff, or finding new influences, like bass players that you might not have been, you might have been aware of them, but hadn't really studied their playing before because you were primarily upright?
Yeah, I did specifically go and learn some of those McCartney lines, and try to play them like as similarly as I could in terms of like understanding all of the articulations and slides, and then I got into a funny phase where I was like trying to understand and get better at picking, and I went to Irish music for some reason. Like I was just learning like Irish kind of fiddle tunes on upright bass, on electric bass with a pick. I'm interested in like digging into what other people have done with an instrument, but it's also just fun to like have a kind of playground of what does this instrument do? And like, how do I play eighth notes on it? How do I play triplets on it? Like what, that's kind of more what I was doing on upright bass too, is like spent some time learning what upright bass players were doing on the upright bass, but also just seeing what I could do with it that people were doing on the saxophone or that people were doing on, you know, electric bass. Definitely had spent a lot of time trying to make the upright bass sound like an electric bass.
I can't wait until you get into your Cliff Burton phase and start doing some Metallica
tapping. Yeah. That's the next frontier.
Let's talk about your rig for a bit. So going from the upright, starting with the upright bass, like the live rig, because I don't, you know, the bands that I play in, we don't have, they're rock bands, so I don't really play a lot with upright bass players. So what does your live rig look like with an instrument like that?
I use just pickups on stage, no mic tone. It's just, we found that it's pretty hard to make that work with like drums and electric guitar on the stage. So it's two different pickups. One of them is called the Fishman Full Circle, and that's kind of the standard type of upright bass pickup, piezo style. So it goes like, it's built into the bridge. And then maybe 5 years ago, started also using a magnetic pickup that's attached to the neck. So that's like more like an electric bass pickup. It's reading the signal from the strings, not from the body of the bass. But it doesn't sound very good on its own to me. But it's when you blend it with the piezo pickup, which is more like natural acoustic sounding, it just gives it this impossibly bigger sort of depth and kind of fills out the sound a little bit.
I imagine with it being up closer to the neck, it's probably way more round and more bottom end than the piezo.
Yeah, totally.
What kind of amp are you running into on stage? Are you just going DI to front of house, or you have something for stage volume?
Yeah, we're on in-ears, so we just use the DI, no amp on stage for bass.
Got it. And then now moving to the electric bass, you mentioned a low octave pedal. So are you running anything in terms of a pedal board and an amp on stage, or is that just, you know, bass into DI?
I have the pedal board. I think I'll end up for this upcoming tour, because there's so much electric bass on it. I'll probably end up having 2 pedal boards, like one for acoustic, one for upright. And because the upright, I use a couple of effects too. I have like a low level distortion for a few songs that just kind of like makes it as a part of the ensemble, like a little grittier and kind of fit better with the, like, if the guitar is distorted a little bit too, then it sounds weird for the bass to just be like boom boom, you know. Yeah. So just like give it a little bit of edge. And then I have like a low octave and a high octave. The high octave is mostly for solos, and the low octave is for like more of an arrangement kind of thing. Like, you know, you want a section of the song to really like have a lot of wow to it, and you're almost like bringing in a lower instrument in addition for that section. Yeah.
Like a sub bass, like a synth or something underneath it.
Yeah, exactly. And then for this year's like electric pedal board, that'll probably just be that low octave. I haven't gotten too deep with the pedals on electric yet.
Man, chorus, fuzz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All that.
I would like to petition for the next Lake Street Dive record to go full shoegaze, like fuzz.
Ooh, yeah.
We'll start with
reverb,
the bass. Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in the high octave for solos. So when you're doing that, is that more of like to help give you some articulation to let the bass cut through a little bit more? Or is it like a character effect, like it's stepping out and you've got this almost like the bass equivalent of a 12 string sound?
I maybe a little bit of both. Yeah, like The song that I've used that on 2 songs recently. One is for a solo on the song Call Off Your Dogs. And yeah, it's just you're an upright bass, like taking a solo with a rock band. So like you kind of need something. I also like, having played jazz for a long time, like I always found it kind of a bummer when the band had to be like coming dynamically and energetically down for the bass solo, because that just is really limiting in like the kind of solo that you can take. So was kind of looking for ways that the band could stay energetic during the bass solo, and that was kind of part of the solution to that. And then there's a song called Free Yourself Up from an album a couple albums ago that has this like Zappa-esque instrumental unison section in the middle of it that's like real chromatic. So that's kind of like where the entire band would just like push every pedal that they have for that section.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So going back to the guitar playing thing, do you play guitar at all? Is that something like for demos and things like that?
Yeah, I've played guitar it is as a writing tool, and then I've done some touring where I'm like playing solo, just guitar and voice. And so for that kind of setup, like I've learned a way of playing that's like very similar to me playing bass. Like it's I'm hanging out on those low 4 strings quite a bit. I'm not, I don't know how to really be like, if someone was like, I want you to be the guitar player in my band, I would have no idea how to do that. But like arranging an instrument for like a solo performance is primarily what I've done with the guitar at that, and just like super functional, like here are the chords of the song for a demo.
That's how bass started for me, and then it grew into, honestly, I enjoy playing bass now as much or more than playing guitar. It's just so much fun, especially not with it not being my primary instrument, you know. And you were right when you said a minute ago about it being so powerful. Like this is why I wish every guitar player out there would pick up bass and learn bass properly, because it's so informative and powerful and fun. And it really teaches you as a guitar player that you are part of the rhythm section, not playing on top of the rhythm section, which I think I was guilty of for a long time. And I think a lot of very talented and experienced guitar players are guilty of, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely like playing more electric bass the last couple of years has helped out my guitar playing a lot too, because they're super similar, the orientation and the scale, and then I'm just like, oh, I have all these other fun notes up here too. So,
yeah. Well, that was great. Tell the fine folks where to find out more about you and all the stuff that you got coming out, because Good Together's coming out 21st of June, I believe. And what else you got coming?
The band has Good Together coming out, and we're doing a big old tour this summer. We're playing Madison Square Garden for the first time.
Wow.
Yeah, that's totally wild.
That's awesome.
We're going to be in a bunch of beautiful places, playing outside a lot. And so all looking forward to that. And I also just put out this solo record, Comeback Kid, a couple weeks ago. And so I've been doing some touring for that. I have some shows coming up in the Midwest in May. That's all at my own like website, socials, bridgetkearney.com.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Bridget, thank you so much for joining us. It was awesome having you on, and hopefully we'll see you guys out on tour at some point this year.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
That was great. That was, I mean, genuinely. And also Madison Square Garden for Lake Street Dive. That's huge, man.
Man, like it's so, like, cause just like you, I think so many of us saw one of those, it was like a Jackson 5 cover on YouTube years ago with them singing on like a street corner, and like these guys are great. And then just to see it go up, because I've seen them at Ascend and stuff, and what a what a milestone. I don't know. Where do you go from there? Like, where do you,
I don't know.
Sell out Giant Stadium, that sort of thing?
Yeah. It's just cool to see a modern band that is so musician driven, get so popular. They're all such heavy hitter players and writers and vocalists. They sound amazing together. It's just encouraging to see that. So, yeah.
And have you seen them live yet?
Not yet. No, I really want to go. And Tilly's a massive fan of theirs, even more so than me. So I think I'm gonna try and take her on this tour, try and go see them.
Yeah, when I've seen them, it's always just like a really tight, stage, and it's just cool because, like you said, it's just musicians like playing the hell out of their instruments, and it's just an awesome time, regardless of stage size. It's really cool.
Yeah. Nice. All right, time for the shill. What do you got?
Oh man, so you're gonna like this one. It's green, but it's not a screamer. It is this. The Echo Cooler.
What?
With Slimer on it, man. Look at that.
What is it?
Josh Scott sent me this. Of course he did.
Of course he did.
And he just sent this in my Instagram, and I was like, I've never heard of this company. The name of the company, I don't know how they expect you to say it. It's zero space G space IOD, zero G IOD. I don't know, but it's called the Echo Cooler. It's got Slimer on it. When you turn it on, his eyes light up, which is neat. But it says it's a reverb drink that contains 10% delay juice. So
okay.
It has a decay and space knob, which is your feedback and the time of the pre-delay. It's modulated. Cool. And you have like a reverb mix control and then a slime knob, which I don't know what it does, but then the foot switch over here is a soft touch that kills the dry. So you can go just full wet. And it is, it's interesting and different. And I like it because, there was a moment in my life, like so many of us guitar players, where I said, all I need is a Rat and an RV3 and a Vox. And I can make music. And it kind of takes me back to those days. So it's like a fun, shoegazy indie rock sort of sound.
Hey man, a Rat and a Vox, that's a Schofield sound.
Well, or that. Yeah, well, I'm not as good as him, so
I mean, nobody's as good as him, but
true.
Nice. All right, I got a pedal too.
Yeah.
The Abelia Fuzz from Beatronics.
Oh.
This thing, I've been using it a lot recently. I've been kind of getting back into recording tracks for my videos. And as I do, I put fuzz on. Fuzz ends up on anything that I write and record.
Sure.
So this is, Abelia means bee in Portuguese, obviously. And it's they call it the tropical fuzz. And I believe that's in reference to the genre, like the Tropicalia genre based in Brazil. And It's got two modes. So it'll do kind of straight ahead fuzz tones, right? From sort of medium gain to pretty gnarly spitty stuff. But if you double tap the foot switch here, it switches to this Tropicalia mode, which is super nasally. There's like no low end. It's all high mid range and high end. And it's just on its own sounds like really piercing and kind of weird. But when you put it against other stuff, you get this really cool, just driving buzzsaw fuzz tone that sits in a mix really, really well. And you can switch between it in real time. It's a cool fuzz, man. And like everything Beatronics does, it looks rad.
Yeah.
It has obviously the big jewel up here, but then these are all LEDs that change color around the perimeter depending on what mode you're in and what you're doing. So
it's big.
It's big. Yeah, it's cool, man.
I remember when it first came out, I thought it was called the Abuela. And I'm like, it's a Spanish grandmother?
Yeah, the Abuela. No, it's Abeelha, Abelia.
Yeah, that's also because I can't read, so I don't.
Well, I mean, yeah.
But that's cool, man. They make great stuff.
Yeah, I love those guys over there. They're so cool, and everything they do is badass. So yeah.
Well, again, thanks to all our patrons over on Patreon. We appreciate all the support and everything that you guys do to be a part of this community. If you want to learn more, go to the link in the description below or in the show notes, and you can learn all about it.
Yeah, and you can subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. If you are listening, make sure you rate and review the show. Helps new people find us. And we'll see you guys real soon on the next episode.
Till we meet again.